I am a lawyer with an extremely high winning rate. When I perform normally, I can sometimes get my opponent sent to prison. When I perform at my usual level, I can get both my opponent and their lawyer sent to prison. When I perform exceptionally well, I can even get the person wielding the gavel sent to prison. Even Zhang San has to call me his master. However, an accident unexpectedly caused me to travel into another parallel world. In this world, I was a terrible rookie lawyer. After practicing for 2.5 years, I had only taken 5 cases and lost 4 of them. After arriving here, I couldn't even get a single case for half a month. Just when I was at my wit's end and preparing to find another job, an elderly couple walked into the law office. I thought, finally, a case is coming! I approached them and asked what kind of case they needed help with. The old man slowly said, "The lawsuit we're dealing with is a criminal case. Our son is suspected of robbing a bank. We want to hire a lawyer to defend him. Hopefully, you can get his sentence reduced." I became extremely excited. A bank robbery involved criminal prosecution, and such cases were usually very difficult. But that was exactly what I wanted. A difficult case that could make the law firm famous. I asked the old man to explain the entire case. The old man was named Wang Zizhang, and the woman was Zhang Kuifang. Both were retired local workers. They had their only son late in life. The story was this. Their son had gone to the bank to withdraw money for his father's medical treatment. The money belonged to his father. Because he wasn't the account holder, the bank required him to prove that he was the old man's son. He had brought identification documents, the household registration booklet, and other documents, but the bank still refused to let him withdraw the money. The bank employee insisted that the old man himself had to come to the bank and personally confirm that the man's son was, in fact, his son. Otherwise, the money could not be withdrawn. But at that moment, the old man was lying in the ICU, desperately needing the money to save his life. While the son was arguing with the bank employees, several robbers suddenly entered and robbed the bank. One of the robbers learned that the old man's son urgently needed money for his father's medical treatment. Without hesitation, the robber gave him part of the stolen money. At the time, the son had no time to think about anything else. He took the money directly to the hospital. Later, the robbers were arrested. Because the old man's son had been found carrying the money, he was treated as being involved in the robbery and was sentenced to 20 years in prison for serious robbery. The family had previously hired a lawyer who claimed to be a top criminal defense attorney. He demanded a legal fee of 18,800 yuan, but in court he only said 3 sentences. "Very good. We accept the presiding judge's judgment." This made the old man tremble with anger. Zhang Kuifang quickly patted Wang Zizhang on the back. "Lawyer Su, this case has attracted a lot of attention. We've heard that if it goes to final appeal, the hearing may be broadcast live. We don't trust the big law firms. We've approached many small firms, but none of them were willing to take the case." I thought, isn't this basically free advertising for the law firm? So I accepted the case without hesitation and promised them that if they were unhappy with the result, they wouldn't have to pay my legal fee. After signing the contract, I gathered the materials and prepared to go to court to obtain copies of the case files. Just then, a young female university student walked in. "Hello, Lawyer Su. I'm here to report for work." After thinking hard, I finally found information about her in the previous owner's memories. Her name was Liu Ruyan. She had previously been hired by the original owner as a trainee lawyer, and today was her first day reporting for work. Liu Ruyan was a 4th-year law student and an excellent student at Nandong University of Law. She had applied to this small law firm because she wanted practical experience. "Since you're here, come with me to the court." Soon, we returned from the court with copies of the case files. After reading them, Liu Ruyan became worried. The first and second trials reached the same judgment. That will have a major influence on the final appeal. Unless we can produce some kind of decisive new evidence, there's a very high chance that the original judgment will be upheld. And I heard the prosecutor handling this case is extremely formidable. Oh no, is my first case going to fail before it even begins? Despair began to fill Liu Ruyan's heart. But by then, I had already discovered the problem in the case. Let's go. Liu Ruyan was still immersed in despair when my words suddenly snapped her out of it. Where are we going? This case has basically already been decided. We're going to meet Wang Li and the other suspects and see what they have to say. Are we going to lose? We haven't even started the trial yet. This case really is difficult, Lawyer Su. You have to stay strong. Lose? The word lose isn't in my dictionary. Wang Zizhang's son didn't rob the bank in the first place. How could I possibly lose? He didn't rob the bank? Lawyer Sue, what do you mean? You'll find out when the trial begins. It's a secret for now. I smiled confidently and walked forward. Soon, Wang Li was brought in. I took Liu Ruyan with me to the interrogation room. Wang Li looked exhausted. After going through the first and second trials, he had completely lost hope of getting his sentence reduced. He looked up at me. Hello, lawyer. Do you think I still have a chance? Of course you do. I promised your parents that if I couldn't win the case, you wouldn't have to pay my legal fees. Really? You're not just trying to fool me? If I can't win, you don't pay. You're confident you can win? I took out the signed legal representation agreement. This section explains the legal fee arrangement. Take a look. Wang Li looked through the contract. It really did say that if the case wasn't won or his sentence wasn't reduced, he wouldn't have to pay. But then he remembered something someone in the detention center had told him, and his expression fell. Lawyer Sue, I believe you're not a dishonest lawyer, but I'm afraid the legal fee arrangement is going to be difficult. If I chose to take this case, I naturally have confidence. Winning isn't a problem. Let me ask you this. Do you want your sentence reduced? If you cooperate properly, reducing the sentence shouldn't be a problem. How much it can be reduced will mainly depend on your own attitude. I was extremely confident about the case. I'll cooperate. Seeing my confidence, Wang Li nodded firmly, and a small spark of hope appeared in his heart. I signaled Liu Ruyan to prepare her notes and began asking about the details of the incident and the exchanges that had taken place during the first and second trials. Half an hour later, I walked out of the detention center satisfied. I had confirmed everything I needed to know. Now we were ready to fight the case. Page 2. Back at the law firm, I organized the trial materials and called Liu Ruyan into my office. The office was actually just a small private space, partitioned off with several pieces of cloth inside the firm. Contact Wang Zizhong and his wife and tell them we're going to apply for a final appeal. You should also prepare the materials for the appeal. But a final appeal requires new evidence, Lawyer Sue. What exactly are our claims? I've already prepared the evidence and claims. You just need to submit them. I handed the organized materials to Liu Ruyan. She opened them, then uncertainly rubbed her eyes. Lawyer Sue, isn't this application a little too aggressive? This case should be like this. We can't afford to be timid. Go and take care of it. Liu Ruyan walked out of the office with an expression that suggested she was questioning her entire life. She looked again at the application materials I had given her and gasped. She confirmed one thing in her heart. I really did choose the right law firm. If we actually won, following me would allow her to take her first real step toward establishing herself in the legal profession. Liu Ruyan had originally joined this law firm because she wanted to start at a small firm and build her reputation through her own abilities. If she could participate in winning this high-profile bank case, then as a trainee lawyer, she would already have valuable experience. The more she thought about it, the more excited she became. She worked tirelessly, traveling between the law firm and the court every day. Even on days when she wasn't paid, she remained energetic. I could only sigh. Young people of this age, especially trainee lawyers, are truly full of hope. Before long, the final appeal application concerning Wang Zizhong's son, Wang Li, was completed. The application was approved. At the same time, a court summons arrived at the bank. The bank was surprised when it received the court's notification. The lawsuit accused the bank of improper procedures that had resulted in Wang Li being prosecuted. The plaintiff was requesting 200,000 yuan in compensation for personal losses and emotional distress. What does this mean? The bank had been the victim in the Wang Li case. It hadn't even demanded that the court punish him more severely. And now the bank had received a court summons because the other side was suing the bank? Isn't this ridiculous? Does the robber actually think he has a case? The people in charge of Nandu Bank were furious. They felt the other side had gone too far. They immediately contacted the legal department and ordered them to handle the matter seriously. The legal department held a meeting to discuss the lawsuit. At first, Nandu Bank's lawyers thought the opposing lawyer must be some famous attorney. But after investigating, they discovered that the opposing firm was merely a small marriage consulting law firm. They couldn't help laughing. What does this mean? Are they crazy? A tiny marriage consulting law firm taking on a criminal case would already be ridiculous. Now they're actually suing our bank? They must be desperate for publicity. Ha ha ha! This is a complete joke. Just ignore this clown show. Maybe this law firm is so desperate to become famous that they're using an extreme method to attract attention. I really don't understand. How does a marriage lawyer have the nerve to take on a criminal prosecution? Probably another attempt to scam money. Who knows? All right, everyone, enough. The head of Nandu Bank's legal department, Zhu Jiqiang, had a square face and an intimidating expression. The room immediately became quiet. The bank's leadership attaches great importance to this lawsuit. We must win. But winning isn't the most important thing. We need to win decisively. Preferably, the other side should receive an even heavier sentence. Understand? Everyone in the room was experienced in banking law. They weren't particularly concerned about Baijun Law Firm. Director, according to the information we have, Baijun Law Firm is just a one-person firm, mainly focused on consultation. The lawyer has practiced for 5 years and has handled only 5 lawsuits. He lost 4 of them. The one he won was an ugly victory. His client was involved in a dispute over marital property, yet the client ended up being convicted of a serious offense. If our legal department can't defeat a lawyer like that, wouldn't that be humiliating? A male lawyer who looked barely over 20 spoke arrogantly. The others agreed. If someone like that beats us, our bank's reputation will be completely ruined. Exactly. What reputation does he even have? The bank's lawyers were extremely arrogant and completely looked down on this tiny consulting law firm. They also applied to have the hearing broadcast live and requested that Wang Lai's final appeal and the lawsuit against the bank be heard together. The case was highly unusual. It quickly attracted the attention of the higher court handling the matter, and the request was approved. The case was closely connected to the bank's operations. At the same time, because of its unusual circumstances, the topic of being sentenced to 20 years for taking money to save one's father quickly became a hot topic online. Public discussion about Wang Lai's case had already begun during the first and second trials. Now that the case had reached its final appeal, online discussion started spreading again. People commented, "How has the bank suddenly become the vulnerable party? When you want to withdraw money, they make you jump through all these hoops. But when they want you to apply for a credit card, they're incredibly enthusiastic. Support Wang Li!" If the bank hadn't made such a fuss, Wang Li could have withdrawn the money and saved his father. He wouldn't have needed to get involved in a robbery. Exactly. When you deposit money, the bank employees treat you like royalty. When you withdraw money, they treat you like you're begging. Support! You people don't understand the bank's difficulties. Actually, the bank may have its reasons. Look at why every major incident involving missing money during withdrawals gets blamed on temporary employees. It's not the bank's fault. Blame the temporary workers. Most of the online discussion was criticizing the bank. When the people in charge of Nandu Bank saw the public reaction, they became furious. They ordered that the bank must win the live stream trial. Furthermore, they had to win the public relations battle as well. If you can't do that, I'll replace everyone in the legal department. Meanwhile, at Baijun Law Firm, I happily watched videos and followed the online discussion. The public mood was turning in our favor. At this point, the lawsuit against Nandu Bank and Wang Lai's final appeal had attracted enormous attention. If we win, the law firm becomes famous. If we lose, the law firm becomes famous. Liu Ruyan looked at the online comments. She was excited, but also worried. "Lawyer Su, we've caused such a huge commotion. If we win, we'll definitely become famous. But if we lose, it'll become a huge stain on our reputation." I was sitting in a reclining chair. "There is no if," I looked at her. "The cases involving Nandu Bank that I asked you to research recently, and the contact information of the victims. Have you organized them?" "Yes. Give them to me." Liu Ruyan handed over the documents. I turned directly to the page containing contact information for people who had sued Nandu Bank. Then I called the first number. "Hello, I'm a lawyer from Baijun Law Firm. I heard that you previously sued Nandu Bank but lost. Would you be interested in seeing how Nandu Bank lost a lawsuit?" "Ah, yes, good. Thank you for your support." After hanging up, I called the second person using the same approach. Liu Ruyan watched me with surprise. "We can find witnesses this way too?" She clearly didn't quite understand what I was doing. It was completely different from what she had been taught at school. "It feels very unconventional," she thought, "but it's incredibly effective." She couldn't see much of the style of a highly professional senior lawyer in me, but she was learning plenty of other things, understanding people, finding witnesses, and knowing how to make practical use of personal connections. "Don't just stand there. Come over and make calls with me. I can't make all these calls myself." Okay. At 10 o'clock that night, after finishing this work, I took a sip of tea and let out a long breath. All the preparations were finally complete. Everything was ready. Now all we had to do was wait for the trial. The court attempted an out-of-court mediation. As expected, Nandu Bank refused to consider settlement. The bank declared that it would definitely win the lawsuit. I wasn't impressed. Anyone can talk big outside the courtroom. Let's see what happens when we actually meet in court. Soon, the day of the trial arrived. Because the case had attracted considerable attention online and had significant news value, many reporters were waiting outside the courthouse. As soon as Nandu Bank's lawyer arrived, reporters surrounded him. His name was Lee Mo. He cleared his throat twice and looked confident. To all the reporters here, Nandu Bank is aware of the comments online. We will explain everything later. As for our chances of winning, there's no need to worry. I believe everyone can make their own judgment. This trial is being broadcast live. If you're interested, you can watch it. As for the opposing law firm, you can look it up online. I don't think it's appropriate for me to comment here. After speaking, Limo entered the courtroom confidently surrounded by reporters. Compared with the attention Limo and Nandu Bank received, our side was extremely quiet. Lawyer Sue, the difference in treatment between the two sides is huge, Liu Ruyan remarked. I raised an eyebrow. The greater the difference now, the more satisfying the media coverage will be later. Don't worry about it. Let's go inside. Just as we were about to enter the courtroom, a young female reporter carrying a camera hurried toward us. Excuse me, are you the lawyer from Baijun Law Firm? What's this? Hello, I'm a reporter from Elephant Media. Could I interview you? The young reporter looked nervous, probably because she was relatively new to the profession. I smiled slightly. Sure. She visibly relaxed and became more professional. Lawyer Sue, I've heard that Nandu Bank's legal department has had a success rate of as high as 86% in the Nandu courts. What do you think the chances are that Baijun Law Firm will win this case? I cleared my throat and adjusted my suit. As for the lawsuit against Nandu Bank and Wang Lai's final appeal, Baijun Law Firm is very confident. Everyone is welcome to hire Baijun Law Firm for legal representation. The reporter was silent for several seconds. She seemed slightly disappointed. That was basically just an advertisement. Nevertheless, she maintained her professionalism. Then I hope Lawyer Sue wins and that your law firm continues to grow. Thank you. I smiled and turned around, leading Liu Ruyan into the courtroom. As we waited for the hearing to begin, Liu Ruyan looked nervous. Lawyer Sue, this trial is being broadcast live. What if something goes wrong? What if? There is no what if, unless the presiding judge deliberately makes an incorrect ruling. If that happened, the case would become even more sensational. I smiled and indicated that she shouldn't worry. In this parallel world, the legal system placed great importance on the law. The law was considered sacred. Everyone was equal before the law. There was no such thing as a judicial paradise. If there was an objection, an application could be made, and the court officials would have to deal with it. Judges generally followed the law strictly. I had already investigated the judges in this case. The presiding judge was a female judge named Yu Kaguya, vice president of Nandu Court. She had studied law extensively and had worked in the courts for many years. She had presided over hundreds of trials and was known for making well-reasoned judgments. She had also presided over the original Nandu Bank robbery case. I wasn't worried about unfair treatment because Yu Kaguya was famous for impartial judgments. What do you mean? Liu Ruyan asked. Don't worry about that now. The trial is about to begin. A court employee approached us. After confirming our identities, we were allowed inside. Both lawyers took their seats. A court official began reading the courtroom rules. To maintain order and the solemnity of the court, the following rules will now be announced. First, all parties, legal representatives, and observers must follow the instructions of the presiding judge. Second, when the judges enter the courtroom, and when the presiding judge or sole judge announces the judgment, everyone must stand. Please rise for the presiding judge and judges. Everyone stood. Yu Kaguya and two other judges entered the courtroom. She struck the gavel. The court is now in session. The basic information of the parties was then verified. Outside the courtroom, the live broadcast was already attracting considerable attention. Inside Nandu Bank's legal department, Bank Executive Wang Wu and Legal Department Head Zhu Jiqiang were watching the live stream. Wang Wu looked up after the trial began. Jiqiang, has the trial started? Yes, it just began. There are already several hundred people in the live stream. Our legal department cannot lose this case. Understand? Zhu Jiqiang smiled and nodded. Director Wang, don't worry. We've prepared extremely thoroughly. According to your instructions, not only must we win, but we have to win decisively. At the very least, we need to suppress the opposing public opinion. So we cannot lose. Many people watching the live stream weren't connected to Nandu Bank. Various media organizations were rebroadcasting the hearing because it had attracted considerable attention. One well-known legal commentator was live streaming and explaining what was happening. The judges are currently verifying the identities of the parties and lawyers. This is normal courtroom procedure. On the left is the legal representative of the defendant, Nandu Bank. On the right is the lawyer representing the plaintiff, Baijun Law Firm. Because the cases are being heard together, there is also a prosecutor on the left. The commentator shook his head slightly. Looking at this setup, Baijun Law Firm is going to have a very difficult time winning. There may be some chance of getting the defendant's sentence reduced, but overall, the odds aren't good. Comments appeared rapidly. Exactly. I hope Baijun Law Firm wins, but it doesn't look likely. They're going up against a bank. That's true, but I still can't accept it. Almost everyone in the comments was pessimistic. Then someone wrote, "Could there be a miracle? Maybe the young lawyer on the right is actually a hidden expert?" Others immediately disagreed. Impossible. Look how young he is. It's extremely difficult for him to win. Legal commentator Luo Daxiang nodded. This case really is very difficult to win. Let's not speculate too much. We'll continue watching. If there is anything difficult to understand during the trial, I'll explain it. Back in the courtroom, once the identity checks were completed, Yu Kajia struck the gavel. Now the plaintiff may state the facts, legal grounds, and appeals. I sat at the lawyer's table. The crucial moment had arrived. I adjusted my suit and began presenting the complaint. Our demands are very simple. First, we disagree with the judgments of the first and second trials. Our client clearly did not commit a crime, yet he was accused of robbery. We request that both the first and second instance judgments be overturned, and that our client be declared innocent. Second, we request compensation from the defendant, Nandu Bank. Because of Nandu Bank's incorrect actions, our client was wrongly sentenced to 20 years in prison. We request 200,000 yuan in compensation for lost wages, emotional distress, and reputational damage. This amount has been carefully calculated and is not excessive. Third, because Nandu Bank seriously damaged our client's reputation, we request a public apology. The apology should be published on major platforms, including legal websites and short video platforms, for at least 20 days. Fourth, we request that Nandu Bank's senior management publicly clarify the facts, not only restoring our client's reputation, but also apologizing to other victims who have received similar treatment from Nandu Bank. The courtroom became completely silent. Everyone was stunned. Is this lawyer serious? He wasn't merely asking for the first and second judgments to be overturned and his client declared innocent. He was also demanding compensation from the bank. A lawyer representing a bank robber is actually asking the bank to pay his client 200,000 yuan in lost wages and emotional damages? Is he planning to rob the bank again? It's almost as if he's openly demanding money. Compared with the third and fourth demands, the first two were almost nothing. Outside the courtroom, viewers of the live stream, including lawyers, court employees, and legal professionals, were also stunned. Many had originally assumed that the lawsuit against Nandu Bank would definitely fail. Perhaps the court might reduce Wang Lai's sentence, which would at least count as a partial victory. But these demands were simply outrageous. Is he making wishes? Even if you're making wishes, you wouldn't make wishes like this. Wow, this lawyer is incredible. Everyone spams 666. Whether he wins or loses, these demands are unprecedented. They might become a famous example in legal history. Ha ha ha, 9,999. This lawyer is unbelievable. Even Buddha couldn't accomplish all these demands. Don't laugh yet. Let's hear what lawyer Luo thinks. Luo Daxiang shook his head. If he has made these claims, there should be corresponding factual evidence supporting them. The demands may seem ordinary on the surface, but the outcome depends on the factual evidence he presents. If he has no relevant evidence, it would amount to making false statements or even giving false testimony. As a lawyer, he probably wouldn't make such a mistake. So I can't say yet. Let's keep watching. Inside Nandu Bank's legal department, Wang Wu frowned. Zhu Jiqiang smiled. Director Wang, these claims are obviously just publicity. If he can't produce factual or legal grounds, he could get himself into trouble for making false statements. Then public opinion will turn completely in our favor. Wang Wu stared at the live stream. Regardless, remember this, Nandu Bank must win. Of course. In court, Yu Kajia frowned slightly at my demands. Are these claims really serious? At this moment, Li Mo couldn't help but sneer. Can the plaintiff's lawyer produce the factual evidence and legal basis supporting these claims? If he can't, he may be punished for obstructing judicial proceedings. I smiled. That seems to have nothing to do with the defendant's lawyer. Presiding judge, opposing counsel is verbally attacking me and attempting to interfere with the proceedings. I request that opposing counsel be removed from the courtroom. Li Mo was about to say something. Yu Kajia frowned and struck the gavel. Request denied. The plaintiff's request to remove the defendant's lawyer is rejected. It is not yet the defendant's turn to speak. Defendant's counsel receives one warning. Limo had no choice but swallow his anger. He glared at me. How is this guy so aggressive? The lawyer's demands were outrageous, but if he couldn't produce evidence, he could potentially face serious consequences. That would mean Nandu Bank would win both the legal case and the public relations battle. So Limo gradually calmed down. Yu Kageshiya then issued another warning. As the presiding judge, I have an obligation to confirm something. Regarding the claims you have submitted, if you cannot provide factual or legal grounds for them, you could face prosecution for making a false claim in court. You may be held criminally responsible. I need to confirm that you understand the consequences. Lu Ruyan became extremely nervous. She almost reached for my sleeve. I calmly nodded. Presiding judge, I understand the consequences of making false statements. I accept responsibility for everything I say in court. The courtroom immediately erupted in noise. Silence! Yu Kageshiya struck the gavel. Very well. Since you confirm your claims, the defendant, Nandu Bank, may now present its defense and counterclaims. Limo straightened up. The opportunity to counterattack had arrived. He read out Nandu Bank's response. First, regarding the plaintiff's accusations against Nandu Bank, we request that all of them be dismissed. We also request that the plaintiff be dealt with severely for this malicious conduct. Second, we request that the first and second instance judgments be upheld. Third, we demand 500,000 yuan in compensation for the damage the plaintiff has caused to Nandu Bank's reputation. Fourth, we demand that the plaintiff pay all of our legal expenses. Presiding judge, that concludes our defense and counterclaims. Yu Kageshiya struck the gavel. Both sides have now presented their claims. The plaintiff may present the relevant factual and legal evidence. Everyone's attention immediately turned toward me. After all, my claims had been so outrageous that everyone wanted to see what kind of evidence I had. Lu Ruyan, acting as my assistant, was so nervous that her palms were sweating. Lawyer Su, what do we do now? Do we actually have evidence? She kept flipping through the documents. What are you talking about? You're a trainee lawyer at this firm. Why are you still worried? I took the documents from her. Presiding judge, before I present the relevant legal grounds, I would like my client to describe what happened during the incident. The judge approved the request. Very well. The client may describe the events. At the plaintiff's seat, Wang Li stood up nervously. He looked at the two lawyers beside him. When his eyes met mine, he gradually calmed down. Presiding judge, I'd like some water. Granted. Yu Kageshiya handed Wang Li a bottle of water. After drinking it, he became much calmer. He began, the events were very simple. My father was in the ICU and urgently needed money. I went to Nandu Bank to withdraw money. The bank employees refused because I wasn't the account holder. They told me my father had to come personally, or I had to provide proof that I was his son. Even the household registration documents weren't enough. I remember arguing with the bank employees when a group of robbers suddenly entered the bank and robbed it. One of the robbers noticed me sitting on the floor in distress. He gave me part of the money they had taken. Then I took the money to the hospital to pay the medical bills. I raised my hand. Presiding judge, I'd like permission to ask my client some detailed questions. The gavel sounded. Granted. The lawyer may ask the client questions relevant to the case, but may not ask questions unrelated to the case or attempt to manipulate the client's subjective intentions. Yes, presiding judge, I began. Did you participate in the robbery? No. Then can you describe in detail how the robber gave you the money? Wang Li frowned slightly and tried to remember. I remember that one of the robbers was short. He saw me crying on the floor and insulted me, asking why I was so frightened. I told him that my father was in the hospital. I hadn't been able to withdraw the money, and I was crying because I was worried about my father. That robber seemed to have robbed the bank because he also needed money to save his own family. After hearing my situation, he took 2 bundles of cash and put them in my arms. I continued, What did you do immediately afterward? Wang Li answered quickly. I remember it very clearly. At first, I didn't dare to take the money. I was frightened. Then the robber insulted me and called me an unfilial son, so I took the money. Thank you for your cooperation. Presiding judge, I have finished questioning my client. Yu Kageshiya struck the gavel and looked toward me. You may now present your legal arguments. I slowly removed the key issues raised by the prosecution in the first trial from my documents. Presiding judge, these are the prosecution's arguments from the first trial and the resulting criminal judgment. I believe there are many problems and unreasonable aspects in this judgment, and they have seriously harmed my client. Everyone in the courtroom focused on me. Is he really going to overturn the first judgment? Viewers watching the live stream also became excited. So he's saying he refuses to accept the first judgment and intends to overturn it? This is getting interesting. But overturning the first judgment requires new evidence. This young lawyer looks extremely confident. Support him! Lawyer Luo, explain this to us! Luo Daxiang smiled slightly. This lawyer is impressive, at least judging from his courtroom performance. But as for exactly how he intends to overturn the first judgment, I don't know yet. I only followed this case through the announcement of the judgment. I haven't studied the complete first and second instance files, so I can't make a judgment. Let's continue watching. In court, Yukagia said, "If the client's lawyer believes there is something unreasonable about the first instance judgment, you may use legal provisions to explain and challenge it." I nodded. The first instance court made the following findings concerning my client's guilt. First, the court determined that my client knew the money had been stolen from the bank by criminals but nevertheless chose to take it. Therefore, the court concluded that his subjective intention was to obtain money from the bank and treated him as having participated in the robbery. Second, the court relied on the fact that my client, Wang Li, communicated with the criminals as further evidence. We disagree with both findings. Let me explain why. My client has already made the situation very clear. The criminal was the one who approached my client and asked why she was at the bank. After hearing about her situation, the criminal voluntarily gave her money so she could go to the hospital and pay for treatment for her critically ill father. Most importantly, my client said that her immediate emotional reaction was fear and concern. So I asked the presiding judge, if Wang Li's immediate reaction was fear, how could her subjective intention have been to rob money from the bank? Her first reaction was fear. That demonstrates her actual state of mind. There is another important point. Wang Li said that the criminal insulted her. Under those circumstances, the criminal's reaction clearly showed hostility toward her. More importantly, the criminal was carrying a dangerous weapon. One thoughtless action could have put Wang Li in danger. Under those circumstances, Wang Li's life was not secure. According to the applicable legal principles, Wang Li falls within the circumstances of emergency necessity and therefore should not bear criminal responsibility. Based on this reasoning, we reject the second finding of the Nandu Intermediate Court and the First Instance Court. We therefore request that both the first and second instance judgments against Wang Li be overturned. The courtroom erupted in discussion. Everyone was stunned by the argument. Some people looked at me with admiration. Wang Li's eyes widened. Not guilty? There's hope. I don't have to go to prison. Nandu Bank is going to lose. It's amazing. Her parents found a marriage lawyer who turned out to be an incredible criminal lawyer. Liu Ruyan also breathed a sigh of relief. She looked at me with admiration. He actually has a chance of winning a case like this. Amazing. No wonder I chose this law firm. Meanwhile, inside Nandu Bank's legal department, Wang Wu's expression was frighteningly dark. He looked coldly at Xu Jiqiang. Director Xu, didn't you guarantee that we could win? What is going on? Not only have we failed to get a heavier sentence, but the opposing side is now asking for an acquittal. If they actually win, do you understand what that would do to our bank? Your entire legal department will be replaced. Xu Jiqiang quickly smiled apologetically. President Wang, please don't worry. The case isn't over yet. The opposing lawyer clearly has some skill. His first two arguments are difficult to refute, but the first instance judgment contains several other findings. The remaining points are the most important. Look. Xu Jiqiang took out the first instance case file. Wang Wu glanced at it. Make sure nothing goes wrong. Yes, President Wang. Wang Wu was still furious. Keep watching the live stream. If anything happens, report to me. He left the office. Xu Jiqiang breathed a sigh of relief and wiped the sweat from his forehead. The pressure from Wang Wu had been enormous. As head of the legal department, he understood this case very well. They should win. But when he saw the opposing lawyer, a thought suddenly entered his mind. What if he actually wins? Xu Jiqiang immediately shook the thought away. Impossible. How could some unknown lawyer from a tiny firm possibly defeat us? Back in court, I looked at Yukakia. Presiding judge, my statement is complete. She nodded and turned toward Li Mo. Does Nandu Bank or the prosecution have anything to add? Li Mo stared at me angrily. This guy really knows how to twist things. He only dealt with the first two findings and completely ignored the remaining ones. He raised his hand. Presiding judge, I have a question. Yukashia looked at him. If the defendant's lawyer has a question, he may raise it in court. Li Mo took a deep breath and pulled out the first instance judgment. Presiding judge, I request that the plaintiff's argument be rejected. He handed the judgment to a court employee. Once Yu Kageya received it, he continued. The plaintiff's lawyer has said that he disagrees with the first instance judgment and has provided reasons. However, he has deliberately focused only on the first two findings while ignoring the rest. The third finding was that the first instance court determined Wang Li knew the money was bank property, but still chose to use it to pay the hospital. As Wang Li clearly stated, after leaving the bank, she was no longer in immediate danger. She nevertheless chose to take the money to the hospital. The court therefore concluded that she knew the money had been stolen from the bank. Furthermore, even if the robber had threatened her, once she left the bank, she was no longer in immediate danger and therefore could not claim emergency necessity. Taken together, doesn't this demonstrate that her subjective intention was effectively to take the bank's money to treat her father? Of course, I understand the human side of this. I don't deny Wang Li's love and concern for her father. But from the perspective of facts and law, the judgment against Wang Li was correct. Presiding judge. That concludes my statement. The final part of Limo's statement had been added specifically because he understood the enormous public relations impact of the case. Nandu Bank needed not only to win the legal battle, but also the battle for public opinion. Yu Kageya nodded slightly. Does the plaintiff have anything to say in response to the defendant's counter-arguments? Limo looked at me provocatively. I smiled slightly. This is exactly what I've been waiting for. The time to bring down Nandu Bank has arrived. Presiding judge, I have no objection to the defendant's argument. The defendant's lawyer is correct from her perspective. But there is one point the defendant's lawyer has overlooked. I would like to ask the defendant's lawyer, how did you determine that the money Wang Li had was bank property? Do you have any evidence proving that the money was actually the bank's money? The defendant's lawyer repeatedly said that Wang Li took bank money to the hospital and used it to pay medical expenses. You used that fact to infer her subjective intention. But how do you prove that the money was actually owned by the bank? My question left Limo stunned. What does he mean? What does he mean by asking how the bank can prove that bank money belongs to the bank? It sounded absurd. Not only Limo, but many people in the courtroom were confused. Can he really argue that? That's incredible. He came up with such a difficult question. Even the live stream viewers were stunned. What does this mean? He's asking the bank to prove that the bank's money belongs to the bank. This lawyer actually has something. This lawsuit is going in a direction I never expected. I think my brain is broken. Wasn't this case supposed to be about Wang Li getting her sentence reduced? Why is Wang Li's lawyer suddenly attacking so aggressively? No idea, but this is incredibly interesting. Legal commentator Luo Daxiang would later explain it. In court, Limo was rendered temporarily speechless by my question. From a purely questioning perspective,